Oklahoma City bombing. Earlier today, police in Southern California arrested a man who initially was reported to be the second suspect in the bombing. David Iniguez was picked up by military police in San Bernardino, California, an Army deserter from Fort Riley, Kansas. Fort Riley is the same Army base that Timothy McVeigh, the first suspect arrested and now charged in the bombing, served at. Justice Department officials say that there is no indication that Iniguez is the second suspect in the bombing, but the FBI is questioning him about the incident.
In the meantime, a Michigan man named Mark Kornke is being sought by federal authorities in connection to the Oklahoma City bombing. Kornke was a leader with the paramilitary Michigan militia. He was seen hastily leaving his home with several rifles earlier today.
And the nation took the day to mourn the victims of the bombing in Oklahoma City. There are now 81 victims accounted for from the building, and at least 150 still to be found. President Clinton was in Oklahoma City today to join a large memorial service. The president said that justice will prevail and the American people must stand up against hate and violence.
One thing we owe those who have sacrificed is the duty to purge ourselves of the dark forces which gave rise to this evil.
Earlier today, the President and First Lady planted a tree at the White House to honor the children who died in the disaster.
Well, it was children here at home who made their annual fundraiser an incentive to help those in Oklahoma City. Every year, St. Mary's Elementary holds a special event to raise money for the school. As Scott Nelson reports, this year they were asking for a little bit extra.
Fun was had by all, and rightfully so. It was a carnival. There were games.
Come on, Aaron, hit the thing!
Rides, and even a kids' rock and roll band. But the event at St. Mary's School was doing more than just raising money for computers. Special baskets were placed in different locations, asking you to take pride in the American way.
Even though we thought America's deteriorating, that we still have that feeling of pride and integrity.
Now, the idea to combine the school fundraising effort with those affected in the Oklahoma City bombing was not that of the school board members or its faculty. It was 12-year-old Natalie Rodoni.
We found out, that in Oklahoma City they had a bombing and several people lost their lives, and that was including kids. So we thought when we play our band, we could put out baskets, and then, well, the kids might be influenced by us to give money to those who are in need.
But school officials did not mind that some of the money raised might go someplace else.
We were really excited when the Rodonis came up with the idea. Today is about kids, and what better day to bring people together to raise money for somebody else that's needy in another part of the United States.
At last total, Natalie's idea has raised over $400, and the donations are still coming in. Scott Nelson, Eyewitness News, Sioux Falls.
It appears a drunk driver is to blame for a fatal accident last night that sent 5 people to the hospital. As we told you last night, it happened just west of Sioux Falls, but the charges may go beyond DWI.
10-4, just so you know, we want both helicopters on the ground.
As soon as they arrived, rescuers knew they would need help. 5 people involved in a 2-vehicle accident, 3 people still trapped inside, and all needing immediate medical attention. The accident happened shortly after dark Saturday night, about 7 miles west of Sioux Falls on 41st Street. Police say this Mustang carrying 4 people had just taken a left onto 41st when it was hit from behind by a van. Police say the driver of the van is from Hartford and was arrested for drunk driving, but will face other charges.
Possibly vehicular homicide, definitely vehicle battery.
The homicide charge is a possibility because at least 2 of the victims left the scene with very serious injuries.
I do know that there's some people that have been critically injured, life-threatening, and along with that comes more responsibilities on our part to do a more thorough investigation.
Now, late this evening, police did confirm that 48-year-old Diane Dickerson of Sioux Falls was killed in the accident. She was in the back seat of the Mustang. Her husband, Don, also in the back seat, is in critical condition. The others in the car were Larry and Kathy McMichael, also of Sioux Falls. Police say their injuries are not life-threatening. Driving the van was 34-year-old Jay Gunderson of rural Hartford. No one was wearing seatbelts, and police say they will confer with the state's attorney tomorrow to determine other charges against Gunderson.
Well, it's one of the sweetest phrases in the English language. Tonight, 25 people are calling 950 volunteers to say thank you for volunteering. The annual Thank-a-thon is a kickoff for National Volunteer Week.
A 10-mile line of refugees is on the road trying to get out of the camp.
The top leader of a Japanese doomsday cult is dead of stab wounds. The 36-year-old head of the Supreme Truth's Chemical Research Section was attacked as he returned to the cult's Tokyo headquarters. Police identified the attacker as a 29-year-old member of a rightist organization. He told police he wanted to punish the cult member because of the trouble caused by the cult.
Bodies of 3 French soldiers were flown out of Sarajevo today, one day after they were accidentally killed while defusing a 9mm tank shell. The 3 men were all explosives experts, some who had seen service in Cambodia and the Middle East before coming to Sarajevo. A memorial service at Sarajevo Airport was attended by 200 soldiers and from the Army Chief of Staff.
Well, in the heat of sports playoffs, office pool
magazine timed Easter of '95 for a front cover asking, can we believe in miracles? And they quote Jesus Seminar. My mind raced back to August 28, 1988. I was sitting in the Philadelphia airport and I picked up a Sunday Inquirer. And there half a page was devoted to Jesus Seminar, composed, as I've since learned, of groups ranging from 100 to 79. They are called biblical scholars, scriptural scholars. Roughly half of them have attended 3 schools or taught there: Vanderbilt, Claremont, Harvard. They simply vote according to their scholarship. And they vote that 82% of all the words attributed to Jesus in the 4 Gospels are not authentic. He never said them. I knew in '88 what they were getting at. Biblical scholars means one thing to me. You can talk about the mathematicians, they never attack the field of mathematics. You can talk about your bankers, they never attack the field of banking. You talk about your philosophers, they never attack the field of philosophy. But biblical scholars only attack the Bible. They said that he was at best a faith healer of a sort, that he was a celebrity of his own cult, that he never spoke of returning. And as one man who thinks like this group observed, all mainstream scholars, meaning those that agreed with him, do a little dance around the question of whether Jesus rose from being dead. Meaning what? Meaning they don't believe it.
Howard Cosell was a good man, and he lived a good life. I've been interviewed by many people, but I enjoyed interviews with Howard the best. We always put on a good show. I hope to meet him one day in the hereafter. I can hear Howard now saying, Muhammad, you're not the man you used to be. I pray that he is in God's hands. I will miss him. Nick?
Well, George Foreman is a man of his word. The 46-year-old heavyweight champion who barely escaped with his title belt last night in Las Vegas told us then he was catching a red-eye home to Houston, and there he was, dark shades covering that golf ball-sized lump over his eye, and walking through the airport in Houston early Sunday morning. Foreman dodged a very big bullet Saturday night, though, eking out a controversial close-call decision over Axel Schultz. Foreman was bound for church to preach to his congregation and to put a couple of things in perspective this Sunday.
First of all, it's good to be back home. I'm still heavyweight champ of the world. It's good to be back in church. We're just leaving out now, and we all kind of reflect back on what happened in Oklahoma. I just had a boxing match and a victory, but, you know, sports is just nothing but fun. But, you know, that real things and real business is happening around the world, and you saw the president and the whole world express some grief for the tragedy in Oklahoma. And if I hadn't had my eyes so swollen, I'd be there. So in the next few days, we're going to try to get down and visit with some of the people ourselves. But home and I'm champ. Hallelujah.
Well, before last night's fight, Foreman had been ticketed to next fight in Germany July 22nd against one of two American low-risk challengers, as if anybody's a low risk at this point for him. But the Germans may now demand he give Schultz a rematch, and Big George has already indicated that will not happen. Fred?
Well, we're better to do a little racing than in the backyard of Mario Andretti, Nazareth, Pennsylvania, site of today's Bosch Spark Plug Grand Prix. The PP now loses the wheel, gets caught up on that wall, and that's never good. Now, Eddie Cheever's the leader, but he runs out of fuel. He makes a questionable pit decision with 1.5 miles to go in the race and has to coast to the outside. He's passed Fittipaldi and Villeneuve, and A.J. Foyt, Cheever's owner, is not real pleased about that. The two battle it out. Fittipaldi takes the checkered flag, and Cheever, that is a long walk in, and I'd take my time, too, with A.J. waiting for you back in the pits. Anyway, it is Fittipaldi winning his first series race, edging Villeneuve, and then it's Johansson, Gordon, and Cheever. Next, Martinsville, Virginia, for the NASCAR Haynes 500. They got cameras every place. The suspension cam, that does a lot of good. Morgan Shepherd, Terry Labonte, Dale Earnhardt all get tangled up. Labonte was out. Shepherd and Earnhardt finish well back. Now, the truck trying to blow the thing dry out there, so with 50 laps to go, Ted Musgrave taps Ricky Rudd from behind. That causes a spin, and after the race, crew chief Billy Engel punched Musgrave right in the mush for that. In the end, Rusty Wallace takes the checkered flag after completing only 356 of the 500 laps. Of course, the race had to be shortened due to darkness today. Musgrave finishes up second. Rusty Wallace feeling good all under as he comes away with the Haynes win.
We were one of the first initial triage teams up in the front, and we have been released to go back to take care of whatever we do with our patients on the outside, because there is nothing to do. Everyone that's in the building right now, in 2 hours there was one person found, and everyone else is dead. The coroner had indicated that he needed 100 more body bags, so he wouldn't ask for that if he didn't need it.
This is a lot of what we saw when I was in the Army, and this was, you know, these are wartime injuries. This is the heartland of America, and it's happening right here. And we in Oklahoma think we're as prepared as anyone to take care of these sorts of things, but every city and every place is going to have to be ready now and have a disaster plan in place to handle these war-type wounds.
It's horrific. So I don't understand how anybody in this world could conceive to do something like that to innocent people. I'll never want to look at anything like that again in my life. I really don't. It's absolutely horrific up there.
You know why more and more people who own home computers are buying their software?
half of his beam that's down here on the deck. Right? It's all going to be handwork removal.
What we need to do is we're still looking for evidence of this area.
Yeah, right there. Pick it up a man. Right there. Nothing. Okay.
Well, let's utilize this side for our operation, and we're going to have to change it. We're going to have to grunt it and bring it down. All right? I'm expecting somewhere we'll find some voids somewhere.
We have 6 search and rescue teams. We have 3 teams working now. Another team's moving in to rotate in. There's about 55 people in each of these teams, average. They have some very highly sophisticated equipment that they've brought in to use. And some areas of that building are still unstable, but that does not mean the search and rescue efforts are not going on. It continues. The first 72 hours are very critical in search and rescue, and all the teams are very aware of that, and that's why they're working 24 hours a day.
It looked like in the kid when he stared, like he was laying there, and his leg had rotated completely around.
Just a brief sketch of the building. Basically, it's 10 bays wide by 2 bays deep. The bays are 20 foot by 35. The area that's in here is the area that's collapsed, about 50% of the building. This is 2 bays wide in here, so there's no access across into this area. This wall right here is standing 9 stories high, so it looks pretty stable. It doesn't look like it's going to fall, but we probably need to keep an eye on it. When you get there, you'll see that all the front of the building is all collapsed. But what happened is when it collapsed, a lot of the rebar pulled out of the floors above them. That's what I cross-hatch these areas. And when you get out there, you'll see some cross-hatching and some checkerboarding underneath on the bottoms of the slabs. That's areas that all the reinforcing steel is missing. I wouldn't walk on it, basically.
Phoenix, I want to thank you guys for coming out. I mean, it means everything in the world to us. And be careful, okay? Be careful, okay? Because I don't know how dangerous it is, okay? Appreciate your love. We're walking in a safe area. When we get over here, we're walking back. We're going to get some post shots down here. Can you send the virtual over there? In this area? Over in that area? Yeah, we're just walking. It's probably okay for a short term.
Operating inside the hazard zone. What I'd like to do, if we can get manpower from one of the other agencies or...
I just want to try to dig down to the forest. And once I dig down to that one, down close, and then once I get close enough down there, then I can just move stuff back into that spot.
You got to realize this rubble in the pancake areas, we're doing small voids at a time. When we clear a part of that rubble, may give us some visual into just a small portion of it. We do what we can there and then move on to the next part. The first layers that we started to remove last night are actually the roof and the 9th floor. We have to work down through that till you get down into those lower floors. There's been a lot of questioning about the daycare center. If that was on the 2nd floor, then we have 9 floors of rubble on top of it. So it's going to take a long process. We'll hold out hope until the day we move off of the building.
We have other
hit somewhere else.
Yes, right away.
No, other than these three. These three, that's it. I'm trying to figure what they're going to do with the squad 4. All right, go ahead and go on those two each.
Explodes. You just watch your own room just go to pieces.
I had just finished typing a letter, and I just thought my computer had blown up, and I closed my eyes because the screen broke apart and came up and hit me in my face, and I just kept my eyes closed. And then I opened them again, and it was black, and there was debris, ceiling, everything falling on me. So I closed my eyes again and just sat there and waited it out until I didn't feel anything hitting me anymore. And then I climbed out of my workstation and walked through his front windows that was no longer there.
After the blast took place, it was pitch dark. I couldn't see him, I couldn't see anything, and I yelled out for him, and finally I heard him yell back to me, and we had to crawl over stuff and under and around, and I just remember the debris. Finally, I reached out, and Don and I touched hands, and it was just total darkness, and we just kind of fumbled and felt our way out.
I look at that now and marvel. Everything was a blur. I do have a fear of heights, and I was terrified of coming down the ladder, but I wanted to get out of that building very badly.
I was so excited that they really found me, and then it was a very long process. I know that they had to get a chainsaw, and they were cutting something around me. I still can't see anything at this point. They freed one of my arms, and it kind of created a passageway to my mouth, and they passed me down an oxygen tube. And one of the guys reached his hand down in there and, held my hand and everything. They were really wonderful.
As a minister, I'm damn angry. And I know ministers aren't supposed to talk like that, but I am.
How could another, human being do that to, innocent people? I mean, there's innocent people, especially the children, I mean, it's just, what else can you say? I mean, you just want justice. I mean, everybody wants justice.
I'm not immune to being affected by this tragedy any more than anyone else.
Well, you say you know what the depression is, you can spot it when it comes, but when it visits you, you say you know what to do about it. What will you do about it?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do about it is to cope with it by continuing to try to help others. The second thing that I will do eventually is that I will find that trusted person that I trust and bare my soul with that person.
Wednesday night when I got home, the simplest things would touch me. I mean, I pulled back the covers on the bed, and I looked at my pillow, and I thought, I almost didn't come back here today. And all I did was go to work and try to do my job.
Is it important to get active again, get out of the house, go back to work?
Yes, we're back at work already.
We're working right now.
I think a lot of us have just been so consumed with work, trying to get things back in order, that it's kind of kept our minds off of it to a large extent, and that's helped. It's helped me. I think probably some of my worst times is when I've got time to sit down at home or somewhere.
The next morning, the fireman took me back in to identify some bodies, and I couldn't identify anybody because two of my employees was missing. And I showed them where Bob and I were, and the fireman just looked at me and says, "You're not supposed to be alive. You're supposed to be dead."
It's a terrible
dastardly deed that they done, but it also shows that what kind of state of Oklahoma that we have. People helping people. It's been like this ever since I was a small child. Somebody gets in trouble, everybody comes to their aid.
Until their bodies are removed. The people of Oklahoma, the people of Oklahoma City, the people of the United States drew inspiration this afternoon from the Reverend Dr. Billy Graham when he said, "The spirit of this city will not be defeated." A time to heal, and on this day, Sunday, a national day of mourning declared by the President of the United States of America. He flew here to Oklahoma City 7 hours ago and appeared at a globally televised memorial service.
From the depths of our hearts, we want to trust We really want to believe. And Lord, we pray for these who have lost loved ones and those that are missing. Dear Father, would you comfort them? Would you strengthen them in a way that only you can? And Lord, would you allow us to find some that are still alive? And God, would you protect those and strengthen those who do the searching? Dear God, bless us. We need so much your presence here. Dear God, we need your presence in our nation, your power on our nation. God, turn us to you. May we look to you and your grace and your mercy and find strength as we trust you. And we pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Families of those who have been lost and wounded, to the people of Oklahoma City who have endured so much, and the people of this wonderful state, to all of you who are here as our fellow Americans. I am honored to be here today to represent the American people, but I have to tell you that Hillary and I also come as parents, as husband and wife, as people who were your neighbors for some of the best years of our lives. Today, our nation joins with you in grief. We mourn with you. We share your hope against hope that some may still survive. We thank all those who have worked so heroically to save lives and to solve this crime. Those here in Oklahoma and those who are all across this great land, and many who left their own lives to come here to work hand in hand with you. We pledge to do all we can to help you heal the injured, to rebuild this city, and to bring to justice those who did this evil. This terrible sin took the lives of our American family, innocent children in that building only because their parents were trying to be good parents as well as good workers. Citizens in the building going about their daily business, and many there who served the rest of us, who worked to help the elderly and the disabled, who worked to support our farmers and our veterans, who worked to enforce our laws and to protect us. Let us say clearly, they served us well, and we are grateful. But for so many of you, they were also neighbors and friends. You saw them at church or the PTA meetings, at the civic clubs, at the ballpark. You know them in ways that all the rest of America could not. And to all the members of the families here present who have suffered loss, though we share your grief, your pain is unimaginable, and we know that. We cannot undo it. That is God's work. Our words seem small beside the loss you have endured, but I found a few I wanted to share today. I've received a lot of letters in these last terrible days. One stood out because it came from a young widow and a mother of 3 whose own husband was murdered with over 200 other Americans when Pan Am 103 was shot down. Here is what that woman said, I should say to you today. The anger you feel is valid, but you must not allow yourselves to be consumed by it. The hurt you feel must not be allowed to turn into hate, but instead into the search for justice. The loss you feel must not paralyze your own lives. Instead, you must try to pay tribute to your loved ones by continuing to do all the things they left undone, thus ensuring they did not die in vain. Wise words from one who also knows. Yesterday, Hillary and I had the privilege of speaking with some children of other federal employees, children like those who were lost here. And one little girl said something we will never forget. She said, we should all plant a tree in memory of the children. So this morning, before we got on the plane to come here at the White House, we planted that tree in honor of the children of Oklahoma. My fellow Americans, a tree takes a long time to grow, and wounds take a long time to heal. But we must begin. Those who are lost now belong to God. Someday we will be with them. But until that happens, their legacy must be our lives. Thank you all, and God bless you.
This is LDL cholesterol. If left untreated, it can clog the walls of coronary arteries and result in heart attack. Although much progress has been made in the fight against heart attack, it is still the leading cause of death for men and women. But there is hope. It may be possible to stymie the destructive process of LDL cholesterol and prevent heart attacks. We're working on it. Call today for a free...
And the Bible says in Psalm 147:3, he heals the brokenhearted. He binds up the wounds. And so with this service today, we stand together to say, let the healing begin.
Would you know my name if I was in heaven? Would it be the same if I saw you in heaven? I must be strong and carry on, 'cause I know I don't belong here in heaven.
I am the voice of the children, simple and honest and clear. Forever the light in the darkest of night. I have not gone away. I'm here. I am the eyes of the children, with vision beyond my years. I focus my sight, unblinking and bright, unclouded except for my tears. I am the soul of the children, innocent, blameless, and pure. My spirit undaunted, through violence flaunted, will conquer and ever endure. Remember the trust of the children. Darkness will not have its day. Take hold of my hands, and we'll both understand that the children
will show you the way.
Would you know my name if I saw you in heaven? Would it be the same if I saw you in heaven? I must be strong. I'll carry on, 'cause I know I don't belong in heaven. 'Cause I know I don't belong in heaven.
We've painted the morning sun in Santa Barbara that burns away those blue-gray mists.
whoever is arrested or convicted, let's say convicted of this?
What goes through my mind? I mean, I wonder if they have children of their own. And if they do, how could they do this? I don't wish for anybody to die, but I think that's what they do. It's hard. I mean, what do? Do you leave the room like this? Do you take all the pictures down? Do you give their clothes away? You don't know what to do. What do you do when people ask you, do you have children? What do you say? Well, I didn't have children. My children are dead. What do you say? You don't know what to say.
You know, after walking among them, listening to them, talking with them, sometimes crying with them, I've concluded that the people of Oklahoma City, and indeed Oklahoma State, are rock-solid people. There's a poem that describes them. Please, may I quote to you the poem Invictus. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud, for under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloodied, but unbowed. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll, for I am the master of my fate, and I am the captain of my soul. I'm Bernard Shaw in Oklahoma City as America mourns.
It's Something News and
the weekend working awfully hard on the case, and I decided that this community has been awful good to me. Some of my friends died in the explosion that you see in the background. it concerned me a lot that Mr. McVeigh is entitled to totally objective representation. Because of my friends that died and the other problems, I thought that it best that I be relieved and he get a lawyer who doesn't have any ties to this community, because this explosion has caused such far-reaching devastation to everyone in Oklahoma City.
Since it'll be a federal case, John, they could bring in a lawyer from anywhere who can practice before the federal courts, right?
Oh, I think so, and there are a good many lawyers all across the country who are dedicated, like I am, to preserving people's constitutional rights.
Can you say unequivocally that if you didn't know anybody killed in this tragedy, if you didn't live in Oklahoma City but lived in Dallas and they brought you in, you would defend?
No question. I would defend.
Do you think they will let you off?
Well, I don't want to second guess what the judge might do. That'll make them mad at me.
You seem to have a good reason, though. We have lost John Quell for a second due to obviously some technical problem, or somebody ran over a switch somewhere. We'll take a break and come back with John. We'll be taking your phone calls, too. This is Larry King live in Washington. By the way, tomorrow night, two gentlemen will be with us whose records will never be broken. Pete Rose. Nobody's going to get more hits than Pete Rose. Nobody will play that long. And Don Shula. Nobody's going to win more games in the NFL than Don Shula. They'll both be here. More on this, too. And Senator Spector's still to come. Don't go away.
Larry King Live is brought to you by AT&T and by Merrill Lynch. For our clients, the difference is planning. The difference is Merrill Lynch.
What did they say to get you to leave AT&T?
Heard about the big savings I can get you over AT&T?
Did they offer your business proof?
Not to worry.
Did they throw numbers at you?
10%.
5%.
No matter what they say, only AT&T guarantees competitive prices. Call 1-800-COMPARE for the facts. We're so sure our prices are competitive, we'll give your business 1 month's worth of long distance, up to $200 if you don't agree. So now you can say,
I'm switching to AT&T.
AT&T, for the life of your business.
In Asia, in Europe, the Americas, and throughout the world, the same set of principles guides all our actions. And while we have as clients more countries, companies, and individuals, we don't judge ourselves by this fact alone, but how we live up to our principles. We think that makes a difference. The difference is Merrill Lynch. You could never wear a suit again.
Will do. Obviously, what I have discussed with him and what we have discussed he might do, I can't repeat. You understand that?
I understand it. They're still looking for others. Can you tell us, John, if you can tell us if many others will be implicated, one other will be implicated, what you know on that end?
I can't tell you anything about that.
What is your client like?
All I can say is that he's been very polite with me.
Would you say
I'm sorry I can't be very newsy about that, but I just can't, I don't feel comfortable getting into anything that Mr. McVeigh and I have discussed in any way, and I hope you understand that.
I do completely. But some things are obvious. You could tell us, is he cooperative with you, for example?
Well, I don't want to go beyond what I've said, that he's polite, and I can't go beyond that.
I guess you expect, John, that based on your reasoning, they will move you off this matter. I mean, your reasoning seems so logical.
I think so. I mean, I'm real concerned about, you know, everybody in our country, no matter what they're accused of, is entitled to a defense and the protections of the Constitution. And they're entitled to a lawyer and to a jury that is objective and can weigh and consider the problems without things in the background. And I was concerned as I struggled with a case that there might be something in my mind that might cause me at some point to hesitate or whatever feeling I might have. And that really concerned me. And I thought it very important at the outset to be honest with Mr. McVeigh and honest with the court and honest with you about the way I felt.
You lost a friend in that.
I did lose a friend in that.
When you met Mr. McVeigh, was it difficult for you? I know he's only an accused and know we're way from proving guilt here. Did you have mixed emotions, you yourself?
Well, I had mixed emotion at that time, but at that time I was thrust into it pretty quickly without a lot of advance notice. And I went to work there, Larry, as a defense lawyer. I've been defending people all my life. That's what I do. And I don't judge people. I leave that to God. I defend them. And I went there to do that.
You think the trial should be moved from Oklahoma City, and that's something you think whether you're the lawyer on this or not. Why?
Oh, absolutely, and that's why I filed it. I'm concerned about many times. I've tried lots of jury cases in Oklahoma, and the juries are fair, and they struggle with the decisions. And I've talked to jurors before, trials I've lost and trials I've won, and they've struggled hard with the facts and hard with what their job is. But in this circumstance, it seems to me a burden that is almost too much to ask someone to decide something so important, and whether perhaps in Mr. McVeigh's case someone lives or dies, to have the background of this horrible tragedy as it's affected the people in Oklahoma City. And I understand that how it's affected everybody across the country, because I've talked to many of my friends who are lawyers all over America. But
when you go with a federal trial, conceivably it could be moved anywhere in 50 states, right?
Well, I think it would probably be moved somewhere within the 10th Circuit, would be the states of Kansas and Colorado and Wyoming and New Mexico, the areas that are in the same judicial circuit as Oklahoma.
And then it might be burden on some witnesses, right? Witnesses who might live in Oklahoma City.
Well, I think the witnesses, the foremost concern of any court is the constitutional rights of the accused. And that is that he have a fair and impartial trial. Even grand jury consideration, any consideration by any kind of a jury has to be made by someone who doesn't have the personal impact that it's had on everyone here in Oklahoma City. It's touched all of our lives, and that's why, and I'm no exception to that.
Understandable.
It's touched us all.
Let me get a break, and then we'll come back and take some calls for John Coyle, and then we'll meet Senator Arlen Specter. We'll talk about the president's statements today and Senator Specter's legislative concepts that he thinks should be changed to give the FBI the chance to act tougher in these matters. And later we'll thing.
Let's be justice served.
The little girl's grandmother is still missing.
Other developments on this day, the FBI says it has some new videotapes that may help in its search for suspects. And today we got our first look inside what's left of the federal building in Oklahoma City. CNN's Bonnie Anderson is there right now. Bonnie?
Lyndon, 2 firefighters who were involved in the search and rescue efforts were injured late this afternoon. One sustained cuts on his hands. The second one was more seriously injured. He apparently fell in the rubble. He hurt his neck, was rushed to a hospital, and has been admitted. The work here is clearly very dangerous and it's very tedious, but it continues around the clock, motivated, we're told, by the hope growing slimmer by the moment that someone might still be inside the building, might still be alive. CNN's Greg Lamont reports.
That elevator.
This is the grisly, meticulous search effort to find bodies. For the first time, a pool camera was allowed inside the hellish remains of the federal building. Dogs are used in the effort not only to sniff out the bodies, but also to find someone, anyone, who might have amazingly survived. Time, though, is taking a toll on the many buried bodies. Employees from the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta are arriving here in Oklahoma City. Their mission will be to protect the rescuers from the poisonous fumes given off by decomposing bodies. Fire department officials say they expect the pace of body removal to quicken dramatically now that the building itself has been shored up. In the meantime, this is the very latest information in regards to John Doe number 2.
John Doe number 2 has not been identified and remains at large. He should be considered armed and extremely dangerous.
The FBI says it has obtained videotapes from security cameras in the vicinity of the blast
and may have tape of the Ryder rental truck used to house the enormous bomb. The attorney for suspect number 1, Timothy McVeigh, has decided he wants off the case. He says the trial must be moved out of Oklahoma.
But this is too much, I think, to ask of any grand juror, any trial juror, to try to be fair in a case like this. Because as you have seen over the last few days, this has touched the lives of every person in our community. And of course, I am no exception.
There is also no exception to security.
Morning, ma'am. Thank you for wearing your badge and appreciate your cooperation.
As the city struggles to get back to work, back on its feet, gone are the days of plain old human trust when it comes to other federal buildings. You can't park out front anymore. There are armed guards. Employees must carry badges. And there are metal detectors now.
Will it ever be business as usual?
Absolutely not. No way.
Why is that?
Our trust is gone. You work for the federal government, especially with the Internal Revenue Service, you've always got some trepidation and concern, but it's just never going to be the same.
Greg Lamont, CNN, Oklahoma City.
As we've been reporting, the funerals for some of the victims, both young and old, have already begun to take place, the first of many. It is part of the grieving process, but many Oklahoma City citizens are also searching, somewhat unsuccessfully, they say, for other ways to ease their pain.
Many people in Oklahoma City are feeling helpless, unsure how to go about healing, and many are still making the somber pilgrimage downtown.
Like the beginning of the healing, to see it, you know, to be able to cry, to visualize the people that were in that building and what they went through, you know, when that happened, and just to be close to what went on.
I guess for me the reality is that 100 times that's where I park. That's my trail. That's where I walk. It's just difficult to see it.
Gary Jocelyn brought his family to the bomb site to help them all deal with the tragedy.
Let them realize just exactly what really happened, not something that they're going to see in the newspaper and it's far away from them, you know. It's not touching them when it is. It's touching everybody.
Touching and frightening for a few.
It'll make me more afraid to go in buildings and stuff. It's something that you're going to remember for a long time.
Indeed, the painted message on this police car speaks for virtually everyone here. We will never forget. Among the most traumatized here, clearly the children of this community, and adults are urging them to talk through their fears. Students at one school, however, have gone even further. They've written notes and drawn pictures for the rescue workers. Here's a drawing of the firefighters at the bomb scene, apparently moments after the explosion. I'd like to quote from two of the letters, one from Kylie, who's in the 2nd grade. Dear rescue workers, I saw what happened. I was very sad. I felt sorry for them who were in the bomb. I'm glad I wasn't there then. And from Lindsay Nicole Neese, dear rescue worker, my name is Lindsay Nicole Neese. Thank you for helping the people. I hope the police catch all the people that did this. Simple, innocent words from children that clearly reflect the thoughts of a nation. I'm Bonnie Anderson, CNN, reporting live from Oklahoma City. Bobby?
Bonnie, thank you. Search crews still looking for survivors in the rubble are working under increasingly poor conditions. Federal health officials toured the site Monday to determine whether a health threat is posed by the decaying bodies of victims. CNN's Andrew Holtz has that in tonight's News for Medicine.
Giant blocks of debris threaten workers inside the federal building, but so do microscopic particles.
In the decomposing bodies, there are very deadly, virulent organisms growing. Tetanus, Clostridium tetani, botulinum, perfringens, bad things. And so these rescue workers say, well, gee, you know, I'm okay, Doc. And then I say, would you like to take a deadly disease home to your child? And they say, give me that mask.
The protective clothing also includes gloves, tape, and more.
Last night we used a two-layering system where we put 2 layers of gloves on and then we put our work gloves on. We changed over our filtration mask last night where we went to a 2-layer system also. We used a charcoal filtration system and also a system that would protect us against any asbestos.
The excavation teams mark bodies and move on. Recovery workers take even greater precautions against disease.
In the case of the military morgue people that are working here, they have what's called a Tyvek suit. It's similar to a hazardous material garment that they can wear over because they're going to be handling numbers of bodies with the FBI forensics and the local forensics people.
When they initially come out the fire, there's several firefighters there at a decontamination tank where they just spray them down with a Lysol type of solution, something that would kill hepatitis B or the HIV virus, spray them, and then they are rinsed off from there. Of course, wash their hands with some betadine and alcohol.
Doctors ask the workers about vaccinations against tetanus, hepatitis, and other diseases.
Of course, people on the street aren't wearing masks, gloves, or gowns. And when the wind comes up, it carries dust from the explosion site into the air. So health experts have to consider whether that dust could carry disease.
Infectious disease specialists from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and other health agencies toured the site. Local officials say their conclusion, the public is in no danger.
We had this long discussion with the CDC, and the risk of airborne pathogens is minimal. As a matter of fact, they instructed me that even if a person had an infectious disease prior to expiring, this far out, many of those pathogens would have died.
This is extremely limited to those people that come in contact with those bodies.
Those workers are taking laborious precautions to avoid contamination as they go about their somber task. Andrew Holtz, CNN, Oklahoma City.
News from Medicine is brought to you by Excedrin. When you have a
It's seen, as I understand, leaving his home with a couple of rifles or weapons.
That's
is
the
that
report
correct?
we have, yes.
And there's a manhunt out for him
Yes,
now.
yes.
Well, I must say the federal law enforcement have done a pretty superb job in apprehending the people who are involved in this.
Tomorrow we're going to look more about the rumor mill, and rumors seem to feed these groups, and a lot of it is just bad information, and we're going to look more into those rumors.
You know, the amazing thing is I was thinking about this. There are people who are appalled at the excesses of government. I think we saw a survey that indicated only 15% of the people in America like government. Government has been excessive. Government bureaucrats have trampled on the rights of citizens. They have placed onerous regulations. We see initiatives in relation to the United Nations and other international movements like the Somalia thing where our men were butchered under UN command. And, you know, the people don't like that just as a protest. But these fringes take what is a legitimate discouragement and dissatisfaction with the government as it currently exists, and their solution is to go out and blow people out. And rebuked them and said, "You do not know what manner of spirit you are. For the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them." And even apostles of Jesus Christ wanted to use violence and force to destroy those who were opposing Jesus. And he said, "You don't know what kind of people you are. I am opposed to violence. I did not come to destroy people's lives. I did not come to start a paramilitary movement. I came to save people, not to kill them." And we must keep that in mind in America. If this land is to stay free, it must be ruled by law and order. And if we do not like the administration of justice or the administration of the government, then we should use peaceable means to change it. That's what the Constitution provides for, not armed rebellion and dynamiting innocent civilians in government buildings. This will, A, accomplish nothing, but B, it is totally against the commands of Jesus. We abhor this kind of violence, and I want to add my voice to many others to say we must pray for the victims, but at the same time, we must condemn the type of fringe violence that has brought these acts to pass. So again, those in Oklahoma who have suffered tragedy, we have been praying since the first news of this tragedy began to unfold. We have offered our prayer lines. We have prayed here. And again, if you want comfort, you want prayer, we're here for you. It's 804-420-0700, prayer line, 24 hours a day. We'll be back with our thanks to Lee, and before we do that, I have...
To activist named Mark Hornkey. No longer considered a suspect, Hornkey answered questions Monday about the Michigan militia and whether bombing suspect Timothy McVeigh was a member.
He may have come to meetings.
McVeigh or...
We don't know, because some of the meetings are we have meetings all over the state, we've had meetings all over the nation. The larger meetings are 5,000 to 7,000 people. The smaller ones are about 700 to 1,000. It depends on the facility. It's possible he's even been met, or just as I'm meeting you right now in passing, we have talked. We may have talked. I don't know, because we're going to review a few things. But as far as him being with specific militia elements or being with specific groups, there's nobody that has any knowledge, at least in Michigan, that we've found yet.
Hornkey went on to say in a rambling statement that the U.S. government itself could have caused last week's explosion at the Oklahoma City Federal Building accidentally. Hornkey hosts a daily shortwave radio show warning of too much control in government hands.
In the past, recommendations on how to improve security at federal buildings have not always been followed. In fact, according to government investigators, required safety inspections are sometimes ignored entirely. Problems found included fire and burglar alarms that didn't work, confiscated weapons that later disappeared, and building security improvements delayed in one case for 6 years. A government security expert says a new review ordered by President Clinton should show improvements.
The American public is almost evenly divided between those who think just a few individuals are responsible for the bombing and those who say it's a large group. But the same CNN USA Today Gallup poll also found this, that 9 out of 10 Americans are confident federal authorities will catch everyone responsible. President Clinton's handling of events surrounding the bombing has helped his approval rating. The poll shows people approve of the job that he's done by a 12-to-1 margin.
President Clinton calls for new tools to combat terrorism and condemns the type of angry rhetoric that he says may encourage violence. Some people who make their living by angry rhetoric refuse to be quiet. We have 2 reports, beginning with CNN senior White House correspondent Wolf Blitzer.
A day after attending a national prayer service in Oklahoma City, President Clinton remains visibly outraged, insisting he'll do whatever he can to make sure the nation won't have to endure a similar terrorist bombing.
Our country, our future, our way of life is at stake. I never want to look into the faces of another set of family members like I saw yesterday, and you can help to stop it.
During a visit to Minneapolis, he continued warning political extremists to tone down their rhetoric, implying they promote an environment which allows domestic terrorism to spread.
They leave the impression that, by their very words, that violence is acceptable. You ought to see, I'm sure you are now seeing the reports of some things that are regularly said over the airwaves in America today.
His aides later said he was not referring to conservative radio talk show hosts like Rush Limbaugh. When he arrived in Des Moines, Iowa, he again urged Americans to be careful with their words.
When you hear people say things that they are legally entitled to say, if you think they're outrageous, if you think they either explicitly or implicitly encourage violence and division and things that would undermine our freedoms in America, then your free speech and your responsibility requires you to speak up against it.
The president is also continuing to promote his new counterterrorism initiative, the details of which are being left up to Attorney General Janet Reno to define. But some civil libertarians fear the public's rights will be compromised.
We are not going to accept that American people's rights have to be deprived as a response to the Oklahoma City bombing. We will all be affected by this. And this could very much chill political speech in this country, chill dissenting voices. And that's what makes our democracy work.
So far, the president has not tied the Oklahoma City bombing to his efforts to further tighten gun controls, though some of his aides privately predict Republican efforts to undo last year's ban on assault weapons will now go nowhere. Wolf Blitzer, CNN, Des Moines, Iowa.
The loud and angry voices in America that President Clinton condemned refuse to be silent.
Let's try Lou on the line. Hello, Lou.
Hello, Bob. You have Slick Willie, who just said is blaming talk radio on this. Well, you know, he's such a liar, but he knows that talk radio is bringing him down.
I think what he's afraid of is the fact that there are people out there no longer listening to the media that he wants them to listen to. And the fact that, thank goodness, that there is a place for people like me who think the way I do, and I have a place to go to.
The president didn't specifically name any programs, but he was warning that a message of hate was being spread. Conservative radio hosts weren't buying it.
This has nothing to do with the conservative movement. This maniac McVeigh, the Nichols brothers, they have nothing to do with the conservative movement. These are nihilists. These are people who destroy. These are people who bomb. These are people who murder. And I think Slick Willie has hit an all-time low, even for him.
The president's most renowned talk show critic denied spreading hate that could cause such violence.
Have you ever heard, sir, of the concept of blaming the people who did it? The facts have to be the number one concern, not the motivation. People, wake up. You're giving aid and comfort to the bad guys with this foolishness.
If anything on this day, the president's comments just inflamed the rhetoric even more.
So I got a nice title for Janet Reno, the Butcher of Waco.
Talk radio is getting either too much blame or too much credit these days. It amuses me, but it's totally unfair to suggest that talk radio is generating any of this.
There was one afternoon caller who did disagree with the host.
You're absolutely hysterical. Are you suggesting that Bill Clinton, Slick Willie, is correct to blame talk radio for this?
What I'm saying is that talk radio bears a moral responsibility here.
Oh, cut it out. Moral responsibility?
Yes. Yes.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
You give moral support to some of the extremist views taken by these groups, constantly bashing the federal government and the president.
I'm not constantly bashing the federal government. I'm constantly bashing Slick Willie because he deserves bashing. This is a democracy, is it not? We do have a First Amendment, do we not?
These are...
Do we not have a First Amendment?
Of course.
All right, thank you.
Richard Roth, CNN, New York.
To student assistance. Stories and more next on KDLT News. Sioux Falls authorities tonight are on the lookout for a suspect in an early morning abduction and rape.
According to police, a 43-year-old Sioux Falls woman reports being kidnapped from the area of 41st in Minnesota at a convenience store this morning. A black male reportedly forced the woman into his car, beat her repeatedly, drove her to an unknown location and raped her. The woman told police the assault began at about 12:15 this morning and continued until she was released near 41st in Minnesota once again about 2 a.m. The woman is recovering tonight from multiple facial and head wounds, including bruises, cuts, and abrasions. The assailant is described as a 25-year-old black male, about 5'9" to 6 feet tall, weighing about 200 pounds. The suspect has short black hair, a mustache, and goatee. He was driving an older model large car, possibly a four-door Buick with possible maroon vinyl interior. Sioux Falls police are asking anyone with information about this case or possibly someone who recognizes the description to contact them.
One of South Dakota's only two men on death row is asking the state's high court to overturn his murder conviction. In Pierre today, the state Supreme Court heard 3 hours of arguments from the attorneys for Donald Moeller. Moeller is the man sentenced to death after being convicted for the 1990 rape and murder of 9-year-old Becky O'Connell of Sioux Falls. Moeller's lawyer, Mike Butler, argued his conviction should be overturned because the death penalty is unconstitutional. Butler also told the court today Moeller was denied a fair trial because the jury heard evidence about 3 prior sexual assaults he had committed. And fingers are pointing tonight, but it's too early for federal agents to know who is responsible for a letter bomb that killed a timber industry lobbyist in California this afternoon. An employee of the California Forestry Association apparently brought in a small package from outside the office, and when another employee attempted to open it, the package exploded, blowing out windows and doors of the small brick building. Federal investigators do not believe this bombing is related to last week's deadly bombing in Oklahoma.
Meantime, the search continues tonight through the rubble of that federal building in Oklahoma tonight. More bodies have been found, perhaps as many as 8, according to fire officials, but rescuers will have to move about 300 tons of debris to free them. Tonight, Jim Hanchett tells us the White House believes the death toll will reach over 200.
Marine Corps recruiting officer Randolph Guzman used to open the store to go to work. Today, searchers found his body in the bombed-out federal building, still in uniform, sitting at his desk. Despite such ghastly discoveries, dogs sniffing for life and rescue workers removing rubble handful by handful are intent on reaching the ruined daycare center and Social Security office by day's end.
It's tough to remain optimistic that we can open up an area like where these firefighters are right here, calling in an area there, and have somebody alive. But that's one of the things that's got to keep these guys and gals going.
The latest on the suspects now. The FBI reports John Doe number 2 is still at large. Timothy McVeigh's lawyers withdrew from the case today, citing safety concerns and urging any trial be moved to Denver.
One of my primary concerns is that I had a number of friends who died as a result of the tragedy at the Murrah building.
Brothers James Nichols of Michigan and Terry Nichols of Kansas are still being held only as material witnesses, although there are news reports that Terry Nichols may be under arrest by week's end. And the FBI says it has some surveillance camera video of the bomb site, but once more.
We are urging anyone with security video cameras, particularly those located in convenience stores and restaurants that were operating in the area near the time of the blast and have preserved that tape, to contact the FBI hotline.
And the burials have also begun. At this funeral home, services for 3-year-old Kayla Titsworth, who went to the building with her dad. He was injured, but survived. Ricky Tomlin did not. He was at work on the phone when the bomb went off, killed in mid-sentence as he talked with his wife. The phone went dead, and Tina Tomlin wants the same fate for her husband's killers.
And I just pray to God that they pay. I want them to pay. I want them to hurt. I want them to suffer.
And for the first time, there is beauty outside the building. Mums brought by the Alabama PTA for the children still inside.
Searchers tonight have once again revised when they will reach the daycare center. They now believe it will be at least Tuesday before they can dig all the way through the 3 floors of pancaked concrete still in their way.
And the Sioux Falls Fire Department and the Firefighters Union Local 814 have set up a relief fund to help victims of last week's bombing in Oklahoma City. As of noon today, the firefighters started accepting donations through an account set up at Norwest Bank. They plan to continue taking cash donations through May 12th, when 100% of that money will go to a bank in Oklahoma City for distribution to the victims and their families.
From the future of Social Security to student assistance for higher education, local residents spend today searching for answers.
And floodwaters hit Davison County. We'll add up the damage next on KSFY News.
This weekend's all-time.
You're in the market for entered a letter of intent for the sale, but neither party is disclosing terms. Trail King employs 470 people in the Mitchell area, and it is the nation's largest manufacturer of specialized trailers for heavy equipment. Thompson says other than additional capital for ongoing expansion, the sale to Carlisle will not impact the Mitchell manufacturer.
Recent rain and snow has caused the James River to again swell over its banks. This time, the river's weekend crest in the Mitchell area washed away a flooding record set just 2 years ago. But as John Austin reports tonight, the floodwaters of 95 so far have caused only minimal damage to that area.
Down a couple inches today from this weekend's all-time high. The James River near Mitchell was still more than a foot higher than the record 1993 crest of just over 19 feet this noon. The river has swollen up to a mile wide and more along virtually its entire length from Aberdeen to Yankton. The record levels brought Water and Natural Resources water quality sampler Pierre Bernard closer to his work than usual late this morning.
This is the highest that I've ever seen it. It's without a doubt. It's not even close to what it was in the 93 flood.
East of Mitchell, Public Works personnel were scrambling to restore the city's only access to its sanitary landfill, which was lost late last Friday.
We did have water on at 93, but it wasn't very deep there, and it wasn't deep very long. The trucks could easily pass through it then. And right now we've brought the surface up probably at least 4 foot.
In spite of the record this year, damage along the perennially mischievous James has been mitigated by farms and small towns well used to the history of the troublesome floodplain.
Basically, all we've got right now, the river's at a record level at 20.3 inches, crested sometime Saturday and Sunday. And we're still looking at basically some agricultural land being underwater, a few isolated houses that were both in Hanson and Davidson County on each side of the river that were affected, but that's basically all we're looking at.
The Weather Service says even if the rains do hold off, upstream North Dakota reservoirs on the Jim are overflowing and will have to be released as the season progresses. The James River enjoys the distinction as being North America's longest unnavigable watershed and the slowest moving river on the continent. It will be a long time before it returns to its banks. Near Mitchell, John Austin, KDLT News.
President Clinton is in Iowa tonight preparing for a summit on rural America. Arriving in Des Moines this afternoon after spending the morning in Minneapolis, President Clinton will take part in the state's Farm Summit tomorrow. He will also talk to students and the Iowa State Legislature.
Concern over Social Security brought more than South Dakota senior citizens together in Sioux Falls today. This year marks the 60th anniversary of the signing of the Social Security Act into law, but as Cammie Melton reports tonight, many seniors are concerned the program does not have much of a future left.
There's got to be something wrong with the system. Can you address that? Well,
it's the question that's on nearly everyone's mind here today. How can Social Security and Medicare be reformed but not lost altogether as Washington lawmakers look toward reducing the federal deficit?
Social Security is a program people paid for all of their lives, and they deserve the benefits now.
And these South Dakota seniors agree.
Do you have any concerns about losing Medicare or Social Security?
Well, yes, I am, because I have to depend on it.
There's all this talk about entitlements and how it's a heavy burden on the government. After all, Social Security is paying its own way, and all of us who are receiving it have paid into it for the years.
But with a more than $4 trillion federal deficit, there's been a lot of talk about whether Social Security cuts should be part of the remedy. So the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare Executive Vice President and Congressman Tim Johnson are encouraging today's audience of more than 100 seniors to join them in their effort to put the security back into Social Security.
They have to watch Congress very carefully. They have to be very, very well informed. They have to be very vocal.
Johnson was given a pair of boxing gloves symbolizing just how much help they'll need to end what some are calling an all-out assault on Social Security. In Sioux Falls, Cammie Melton.
Tourism in Oklahoma City, and still the body count rises. Rapid developments in the wide-reaching investigation as trace evidence trails a suspect. And funerals for the dead.
I love you, you love me, we're a happy family.
Unimaginable loss for the parents of children who perished. 2 brothers are buried while many of their daycare friends are still buried in the rubble. Good evening, I'm Bobby Batista. Linden Souls is off tonight. The death toll has climbed again today in the worst act of terrorism ever committed on U.S. soil. In Oklahoma City, workers burrowing through the rubble of the Murrah Federal Building have reached the outer region of the shattered daycare center. 13 children are counted among the 88 deaths now confirmed from the massive bombing on Wednesday. The death toll is expected to climb well above 100. We'll have more on the search for bodies and a live report from Oklahoma City in just a moment. But first, there are new developments in the bombing investigation. Investigators say chemical evidence ties Timothy McVeigh to the Oklahoma City bombing. CNN's Robert Vito has the latest on the evidence in the case.
Investigators say they have found chemical traces to tie Timothy McVeigh to the Oklahoma City bombing. One source said residue was found on McVeigh's clothes. Another source said the traces of ammonium nitrate were found in his car after he was stopped for speeding shortly after the bombing. Agents say nearly 5,000 pounds, 2.5 tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer mixed with fuel oil were used in the deadly attack. Sources say there are chemical similarities between the bombing and what may have been a small test explosion 2 months earlier in Kingman, Arizona, near a trailer park where McVeigh once lived. They say McVeigh has been placed in the area around the time that happened. And still another key development, sources tell CNN. Witnesses have picked McVeigh out of a lineup as the man they saw at the federal building minutes before the bombing. But even as the evidence mounts against McVeigh, there are still many more questions investigators cannot answer. Why? Why here? And above all, who else? Agents say they think the bombing took weeks or months to plan. They are looking for several more people they want to question and cannot find. Also held, though not charged, in the bombing, McVeigh's former Army buddy, Terry Nichols. Sources say a search in Kansas, where Nichols lived, turned up fertilizer stored in 55-gallon blue plastic drums. Investigators say pieces of blue plastic shrapnel have been found embedded in the bodies of some of the victims. The man who might tell everything is saying nothing. Agents say McVeigh is claiming he is a political prisoner and is keeping his silence. Robert Vito, CNN, Oklahoma City.
In another development involving the investigation, Timothy McVeigh's 21-year-old sister Jennifer was seen being led away from her house in Pendleton, New York by FBI agents. Until last night, she had been in Florida visiting relatives. The two men being held as material witnesses in connection with the Oklahoma City bombing have been charged with conspiracy and firearms violations by authorities in Michigan. Today's hearing for James Nichols was at a Michigan federal detention center where he has been held since Saturday. Authorities say Nichols, his brother Terry, and Timothy McVeigh made small illegal explosives at James Nichols' farm in Michigan. Terry Nichols is being held in Kansas as a material witness in the case. He faces a court hearing on Wednesday. The FBI has put out a slightly revised sketch of a man they're after in connection with the bombing. The new sketch shows a man wearing a baseball cap. The man's facial features have not changed significantly from the original sketch of John Doe number 2. The FBI is asking anyone with information to call this hotline number, 1-800-905-1514. Authorities caution the man should be considered armed and dangerous. Well, Oklahoma City will be immersed for days to come, digging through the rubble and digging graves. CNN's Bonnie Anderson joins us now live with the latest on the search and the funerals. Bonnie?
Bobby, the search and rescue efforts are continuing around the clock. Workers say that they are slowly, very slowly, getting to the area that was the daycare center. As you can see behind me, they're using large cranes to be able to lift slabs of concrete, and they're also trying to move tons of debris because the area where the daycare center is located is underneath several floors that were pancaked on top of them. Workers are still hoping against hope they might find someone alive in a pocket or void, but they're also apprehensive because they know they'll soon be finding the bodies of children as well. Indeed, today, the family of 2 boys killed in the blast laid their youngsters to rest. The grief of a mother and father. Edie and Tony Smith were joined by more than 1,000 friends and strangers to say goodbye to 2 young boys whose lives and deaths touched so many.
Chase and Colton were loved by children and adults alike. They were happy little guys. They were always the center of attention.
And they were today. Their favorite tune, the Barney song, sung in their memory.
You love me. We're a happy family.
Through the sorrow, Edie Smith and her mother spent part of the day speaking lightly of the past to ease the heavy burden of the future.
Last year for Christmas, he said all he wanted was 5 buffaloes. He said he wanted buffaloes, he wanted 5 ones. And we could never find one until we went on vacation just a few weeks ago, and we found a buffalo at the zoo, and we bought that, and that's in his coffin with him.
Memories and faith, says Edie, are her comfort.
And that's something that I try to remember a lot, and it helps me to stay strong, is to remember that I know they went to be with Jesus. And I know they're in heaven, and they're not going to have to go. They're not going to have to live their life here with all the hatred and the crime. I know that I'm going to see them again someday. I mean, I know they're little angels, and they have little wings, and they're happy, and they're a lot better off now than they were here, even though the pain that we have to go through is tremendous.
At the funeral service conducted by the boys' grandfather, words of thanks.
We want to thank all of the firemen that are still working, sleeping, 2-3 hours at a time maybe, and going back to work. Thank you.
Edie was hoping to meet a rescue worker who called to say he had tried unsuccessfully to save one of her sons.
He said he was working on him inside of the building, and then he had to leave him there
When the second
bomb threat. So I don't know if he was alive for a little while or if he was stuck. But I would like to talk to him just to tell him thank you. He said the hardest thing he's ever had to do is to leave him there.
At the cemetery, the two met. Edie learned her youngest son, Colton, died about an hour after the blast. Edie says, in a way, she's comforted that Chase will now be able to watch over his younger brother forever.
He always watched out for him. You'd see him hugging and kissing on him, going, oh, isn't he precious? Isn't he sweet? He's so cute. And he'd always call him little buddy. Everything they did together.
Chase and Colton Smith were buried as they lived, together. With them, a stuffed buffalo and the tears of a nation. A very emotional day in Oklahoma City, with many more yet to come. I'm Bonnie Anderson, CNN, reporting live from Oklahoma City.
Bonnie, thank you. And there was a funeral for another victim today, a woman who only wanted to help. Rebecca Anderson was a nurse. She had rushed downtown after she felt the force of the blast in her own house. But Rebecca Anderson never got the chance to help. Shortly after she arrived, falling concrete from the collapsing building struck her. She died on Sunday. In death, Rebecca Anderson has come to the rescue of people in need. Her organs were donated for transplant. And to her sister, the donation is fitting. She says, quote, there had to be a reason for the madness. We'll have more on the bombing aftermath in a moment, including more tough talk from President Clinton.
Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world.
Prime News is brought to you by Geico.
This programming note, CNN has decided to continue to report the Oklahoma City bombing story and the search for suspects, as well as the recovery efforts, rather than return to live coverage of the O.J. Simpson trial today. We consider the news value of the Oklahoma City story to be of greater significance than the Simpson trial, which we will update periodically from Los Angeles. CNN does plan to return to Simpson trial live coverage at some point. President Clinton again spoke out against extremist rhetoric today, saying it can push unstable people to commit terrible acts. This as some Republicans chided the president for comments Monday that appeared to link the disaster to extremism on the airwaves. Republicans said the president was getting close to using the disaster to score political points. But today, Mr. Clinton repeated his criticism.
We know that words have consequences. And so I say to you, even as we defend the right of people to speak freely and to say things with which we devoutly disagree, we must stand up and speak against reckless speech that can push fragile people over the edge beyond the boundaries of civilized conduct to take this country into a dark place.
Both parties are united in their response to the bombing. Today, the Senate unanimously condemned the attack. And Wednesday, the president will meet a bipartisan group of congressional leaders to discuss anti-terrorism laws. Joining me now from our Washington bureau to talk about the investigation into the bombing, George Terwilliger, a former Deputy Attorney General who headed the Justice Department's counterterrorism unit, and Stanley Bedlington, a former counterterrorism official at the CIA. Gentlemen, thank you. Mr. Terwilliger, let's review first the trail of trace evidence that is mounting against Timothy McVeigh and how that may strengthen this case.
Well, there is a lot of evidence starting to mount now, Bobby. In addition to the facts that were cited in the complaint against McVeigh, tying him to the truck and to the bomb site, we now have an eyewitness identification placing him at the bomb site. We now have trace elements of bomb materials on his clothes and in his automobile. We have a 2-year history of him making bombs in connection with or association with the Nichols brothers up in Michigan. All of these things coming together are starting to build the government's case. There is a steady increase in the amount of evidence being marshaled to use in the trial against Mr. McVeigh, which will come in due course.
And how about the charges filed today against the Nichols brothers? How did they come about? How may they tie them or not tie them to the Oklahoma City bombing?
Well, there's two possibilities there, Bobby. I think on the one hand, to answer your question, the charges came from the result of the search over the weekend, which CNN carried footage of at James Nichols' house. And there were a number of interesting things recovered there. Bomb-making materials, fertilizer, diesel fuel, fragments of exploded bombs, and most interestingly, perhaps, James Nichols was interviewed by the FBI apparently at the time of that search and made statements to them where he admitted making bombs with his brother and with Terry McVeigh. Now, of course, a good defense attorney will probably argue that fertilizer and a 50-gallon drum of diesel fuel are pretty common items to find on a farm in a rural area, but I would note that, at least according to some witnesses who have been interviewed, Mr. Nichols is an organic farmer and thus perhaps wouldn't be using fertilizer. But at any rate, the tie-ins are fairly strong. And I think the purpose of bringing these charges is, again, to hold Mr. Nichols in custody. All three of these individuals are detained because since 1984, federal law has permitted the detention of an accused where the government can convince a judge that that person, if released pending trial, would be a danger to the community.
Mr. Bedlington, a lot of what is in these affidavits are statements claiming that all three of these suspects made continuous derogatory comments against the federal government or the control thereof, that they all had knowledge or information about the making of bombs. Is that enough to tie them to an organized militia?
Not so far as I can tell, certainly. Perhaps I can make a general point, which I find somewhat disturbing. That is the potential for further violence and unrest in rural America. There's ample evidence now from economic sources that economic conditions in rural areas are in fact deteriorating. There's also some evidence to suggest that some people, previously hardworking, previously law-abiding, have in fact been recruited by some of these supremacist groups because of economic despair.
Well, you know, interestingly enough, in a CNN USA Today Gallup poll recently, 20% of the people surveyed say they think that citizens should be allowed to arm themselves and resist government, and 40% said that they felt the government is a threat to citizens' rights and freedoms. So that would kind of tie in with that.
Oh, absolutely. Now, again, one has to differentiate between two particular groups of right-wingers. And one is the really dangerous groups which consist of the nations, the Aryan nations, the order, the sword, the covenant, the sword, and an arm of the Lord. And then you have the militia groups themselves, who so far do not appear themselves to engaged in any extra-legal activity, but there is some evidence to suggest at least some of their members have been recruited by the white supremacist groups to pursue their own agenda within the so-called militias.
Would you say then that this case
filing trigger mechanisms out of scraps of metal or searching the Sierras for a place isolated enough to test a bomb? The letter to the Times says the group wants the article published. In exchange, the group will stop their bombing campaign. Many families of victims in the Oklahoma City bombing are still waiting for final word about their loved ones. In tonight's News for Medicine, CNN medical correspondent Andrew Holtz reports on how medical examiners go about their difficult job.
These piles of broken concrete, steel, and glass don't look much like the offices they were before the bomb. And so too, some of the bodies found in the rubble bear little resemblance to the people they were before the bomb. It's the job of medical examiners to attach a name to each body.
We are using all of the conventional methods, the dental, the x-rays, from medical records, the fingerprints, clothing, valuables, personal effects, jewelry, tattoos, all of those methods are being utilized with the state-of-the-art equipment and the best people in place to do that we can find.
Dr. Nizam Pirwani, medical examiner for Tarrant County, Texas, knows what the job is like. He identified the bodies in Waco. 85 bodies were found in the Branch Davidian compound. Many of them were burned, and as in Oklahoma City, many bodies began to decompose by the time they were recovered. Often, routine identification methods such as fingerprints were not enough. In Waco, almost half of the victims were identified by their DNA.
We will obtain blood samples from parents and compare them to the John Doe or baby Doe and establish identity of the infant or child.
DNA tests or bone structure can be used to distinguish bodies that are jumbled together in the rubble.
It's human nature to resist accepting the loss of a loved one, to say, it can't be true. Viewing a recognizable body can wipe away any such doubts, but for many of the families here, that won't be possible, and they'll receive only a piece of paper with a scientific report.
In a setting of a mass disaster where, in fact, there's always a question whether the bodies have been mislabeled as acceptance can be somewhat difficult. In the case of Waco tragedy, there were several families that would not accept our identification by DNA studies, and it took a while for us to convince them that, in fact, these remains were their loved ones.
Despite the difficulty of the task, medical examiners are confident they will identify each body.
I think that we will. I really think that we will. That is our goal. And we're going to do everything within our power to do that.
So families can complete their journey of grief. Andrew Holtz, CNN, Oklahoma City.
Won't you?
News from Medicine is brought to you by Excedrin.
Age of movies died today. Rogers appeared in dozens of films, but she's best known to millions of movie fans for the effortless grace she showed while gliding across the dance floor with legendary partner Fred Astaire. Rogers also won an Oscar for Best Actress in the 1940 film Kitty Foyle. Rogers died of natural causes at her home. She was 83. The world of television has lost an original with the death of game show host Art Fleming. He was the first host of Jeopardy! The game show ran for a dozen years on NBC with Fleming at its helm before going into syndication. Fleming died at his home in Florida from pancreatic cancer at the age of 70. Testimony in the O.J. Simpson double murder trial moved along at a brisker pace today. A crisper, no-nonsense Judge Lance Ito cut attorneys short when their questioning appeared irrelevant, limited their comments to the court, ejected 2 spectators for whispering, and cut daily lunch breaks from 90 minutes to 1 hour. Criminalist Andrea Mazzola fielded more questions about her handling of key evidence at the crime scene. She'll testify again tomorrow. Well, if you live on the East Coast, you're in luck. Out west, well, that's another story. Byron Miranda is here with the forecast. Byron?
Hey, Kathleen. Actually, the plains, a bit of weather, rain.
Arizona, searching for clues about bombing suspect Timothy McVeigh. The focal point, Kingman, Arizona, which investigators believe McVeigh used as a home base while plotting the Oklahoma bombing. Records obtained by CNN show that McVeigh was living in this Kingman motel until just 7 days before the attack. Earlier, he stayed at another Kingman hotel, paying in cash week to week.
As far as we were concerned here at the time, he was an ideal tenant. We had no problem with him.
FBI agents sealed off both of McVeigh's hotel rooms looking for evidence to tie him to the bomb blast. Agents already have found chemical similarities between the Oklahoma explosion and a smaller one in Kingman 2 months ago, yards from where McVeigh had lived. Authorities believe it may have been a practice run for Oklahoma City. Also part of the Kingman connection, this mail service, which agents think McVeigh used to try to sell anti-tank weapons under an alias through this ad. Also using the same mail drop, a man who employees think might be the elusive John Doe number 2.
I didn't really talk to him. It just gave him his mail and he left.
Investigators are back again, interviewing everyone who knew McVeigh at this Kingman hardware store, where he worked with his Army friend Michael Fortier, who was worried agents may be targeting him.
I have spoken with the FBI, and I get the impression that that sketch is being modified to fit my face.
Dozens of federal agents are now here in Kingman, working out of a command center at the National Guard Armory. No one knows how long their search in the desert will last. Mark Feldstein, CNN, Kingman, Arizona.
John Doe 2. CNN interviews with those who claim they've known or seen him in and around Junction City, Kansas, paint a picture of an ex-Fort Riley soldier with a thick accent, Southern, perhaps from Louisiana. who frequented this Junction City bar, as well as this one, who checked out of this nearby motel the day before the bombing, and at about the same time was seen with this man, John Doe number 1, Timothy McVeigh, at this storage shed in Harrington, Kansas, and at this convenience store near there.
Never been so scared in all my life.
The clerk at this store, a block from the home of McVeigh associate Terry Nichols, told the FBI that McVeigh and John Doe 2 were here the Monday night before the bombing.
When you saw that sketch, were you like, what did you think? I was scared to death. I knew it was him when I saw him.
Earlier that day, the same day that McVeigh and John Doe 2 rented the Ryder truck from this Junction City body shop, handyman Bob Ray claims he saw them at this storage shed, believed to have been rented by Terry Nichols.
Right. That was that unit right there.
Which number? A retired Harrington, Kansas police officer, Ray says the two suspects had a Ryder truck backed up to this shed.
Right up to the back here.
Uh-huh.
And you couldn't see what they was taking out or putting in.
Later that day, Monday, John Doe 2 is believed to have checked into this Junction City motel, driving a Ryder truck. The manager and desk clerk were reluctant to be interviewed on camera, but the clerk says the man had a thick, distinctive accent that sounded Southern. A similar accent described by trucker Bob Ham, who says he saw a man strongly resembling the sketch at this Junction City bar on several occasions.
I still hope that doesn't turn out to be him.
The man who Ham last saw 2 months ago said he was a soldier at Fort Riley. Patrons at this Junction City GI hangout also believe that John Doe 2 was a soldier. The sketch, they say, matches a man they knew.
As far as I can say his accent, I'd have to say majorly Southern accent.
They say he claimed to be recently discharged from Fort Riley and was also recently divorced. They last saw him about 2 months ago when he was thrown out of the club.
He was really upset and shouting obscenities at people, and he just made a really big scene.
Last time you saw him?
That was the last time I'd seen him.
It is unclear how many, if any, of these people actually saw the bombing accomplice. But in this town, where the FBI knows the truck was rented and where it knows Timothy McVeigh spent much time, what people have to say is taken seriously until proven otherwise. I'm Jeff Flock, CNN in Junction City, Kansas.
Another figure in the bombing story had a bail hearing Friday. CNN's Gary Tuckman joins us now from Oklahoma City with details on that and news from the scene itself. Gary?
Well, Bobby, here in Oklahoma City, this is the 10th night this city has lived with this nightmare, and while the work continues behind me, so does court action related to this case. In Michigan today, a detention hearing was held for James Nichols. He's one of the Nichols brothers who was deemed a material witness in this case. For James Nichols, this detention hearing was regarding an explosives charge, a charge unrelated to the Oklahoma City bombing. But they were not able to complete this detention hearing because a group supplied a lawyer for Mr. Nichols. Nichols already had a public defender, so the judge told Nichols he had a choice between this new lawyer or the public defender to make his decision by Tuesday, and then they will finish the hearing by Tuesday. Now here at the scene, it's been a rough day for rescuers. Late last night, a concrete slab flew off the top of this building to the bottom, which they call the pit, that area. That's the area where most of the bodies are believed to be right now. They had to evacuate all the searchers because the building was deemed to be unsafe. It has now been about 23 hours. They still have not gotten back to the pit. The official death toll right now is 113. There are 94 people unaccounted for. More than 400 people survived this incident 9 days ago, and some of them have some very harrowing stories. Earlier today, we talked with a woman who was trapped in the rubble for 4 hours.
Thank you.
The woman clutching the teddy bear is one of the lucky ones. As she hugs her sister, she remembers what happened when the federal building blew up around her.
At that moment, everything just went black. It was like somebody had turned the lights out. And I felt like I had it wasn't a falling sensation, but I saw like white flashes, like when you see stars.
Priscilla Salyers fell from the U.S. Customs Office on the 5th floor where she worked all the way to the 1st floor. She was buried under tons of rubble. Only her left hand was free.
I lay there and just tried to breathe slow. I made sure I had an air pocket. I pulled rocks out from under me. I could get this hand. I wanted to be sure that I had air coming to me.
Rescuers immediately got to the scene and started pulling out the wounded. 44-year-old Priscilla was by herself in an eerie calm. Then,
I heard someone say, "We have a live one." It sounded like they were far away from me, but the next thing I knew, they took my hands.
but then rescuers were told another bomb might be in the building and they had to evacuate. They did not want to frighten Priscilla by telling her the truth.
And then he said, "Priscilla, we have to leave you." And I begged him not to. And he said, "Priscilla, we have to leave." And I kept squeezing his hand and begging him to stay. And he said, "We have to go get a tool." And I begged him once more, "Please don't leave me." And then his voice cracked and he said, "I'm sorry."
Hours went by before Priscilla finally heard other voices coming her way.
I didn't know how they got me out, but I was lying on my back and I had my eyes open and I saw face after face after face, and every one of them was a beautiful sight. And
Priscilla was rushed to intensive care with a punctured lung and broken ribs. She came home this week. The pictures of her hero rescuers on the wall with all of their autographs. She was with 2 other people at U.S. Customs that day.
And my 2 co-workers, they didn't make it.
Paul Ice's body was found Thursday night. Claude Medeiros is still unaccounted for. Priscilla, in her sorrow, believes she has been given a second chance.
I know there's a whole new world out there for me, and I want to make the best of it.
Many people have been given a second chance. Sadly, many others haven't. This is Gary Tuckman, CNN Live in Oklahoma City.
Gary, thank you. Students around the U.S. share the grief of the children in Oklahoma City. Just ahead, how artwork and electronic technology are helping youngsters cope. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial provides an emotional outlet and source of healing for U.S. soldiers. We'll have a live report on the 20th anniversary of the fall of Saigon.
World News is proud to be associated with Nortel, the company that designs and builds the world's most advanced community.
Cover bodies from the federal building in Oklahoma City. And a new poll shows a dramatic increase in the number of people who worry about terrorism when they are in a public place. The CNN Time magazine poll says 36% of those surveyed worry about terrorism in public places. This compares to only 23% in 1991 during the Persian Gulf War. An overwhelming majority believes it is likely another act of terrorism will occur in the U.S. in the next year. 86% say terrorism in the next year is likely. 11% say it is unlikely. On the day after the bombing, we reported on reaction from students at an Oklahoma City elementary school. Well, now from across the country, other school children are expressing their own feelings. It's our News from Medicine report tonight from CNN's Andrew Holtz.
Something for that school.
Sequoia Elementary School got letters.
And it comes from Huffman Independent School District in Huffman, Texas.
There have been telephone calls from as far away as Alaska. A school in Massachusetts is sending a quilt. And students in San Francisco, California say, let's share faxes. Sequoia's 5th graders draw pictures and compose poems.
My fear. I have a deathly, horrifying fear. A fear that there could be a bomb right here. At this school, at my house, even in my car. Sometimes I can't really go very far.
Different feelings are hard to bear. Some are far, some are near. Some draw tears, some draw fears. Some are happy, some are sad.
The hope, the fear brought people near. Soon even they begin to have fear. Would it happen near here?
You push 1, and then you'll push these digits, and then you'll put this in there, and you'll put it face down, and you'll push start.
Looking at these children, you can't tell where they are. The children are about the same all over. But on this day, through the faxes, children here in Oklahoma and across the continent in California are making a connection.
We want to thank the students of Fellowship Academy for caring enough about us to want to participate in this project.
On the day of the explosion, the first thing that went through my head was, what if something happened to my family? So I got scared, and I wanted to cry out. I couldn't.
So I do believe it's actually helping to ease the pain, although time will heal a lot more wounds than we can.
At San Francisco's Fellowship Academy, students reply.
4, 5.
Another round of faxing completes the circuit. United electronically, these students stand together.
So that's a picture. Here's that picture. Oh, cool. Oh, good.
It offers comfort for those, like Josh and Megan Walker, who are receiving official word that people they knew did not survive.
It'll take us a while to get over it. But I think we'll get over it.
Andrew Holtz, CNN, Oklahoma City.
News from Medicine is brought to you by Excedrin. When you
involvement in Vietnam, but American companies have since invested heavily in the region, and the U.S. government inches ever closer to reestablishing full diplomatic relations. Some of the bitter debate over the Vietnam War has been rekindled by admissions made in a book by former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, one of the leading engineers of the war. Tonight, he told CNN's Larry King why he took so long to admit the war could not be won.
I think we still carry wounds of Vietnam. I don't think we, as a nation, really understand what happened. I believe we made mistakes. And when I say we, I mean the leaders, including myself. And I think we owe it to those who died, and we owe it to those who live, to reflect on those mistakes, try to draw the lessons so we won't make the same mistakes again. That's the purpose of the book.
He kept doing it, even after he was convinced that it was a wrong idea. And about half of the names on that wall are responsible for the fact that he kept it up. And thirdly, he's making money off that book, for heaven's sake. I think that is profoundly immoral, and that is why I haven't read it yet, because I'm not going to buy it.
Cronauer, you may recall, was profiled in the movie Good Morning, Vietnam. The Vietnam War was one of the single most defining events of the 20th century. It divided a nation, fueled rebellion among the young, and ignited a rage that was felt for years. CNN's Charles Bierbauer joins us now from the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in the nation's capital for some perspective that can only be gained from 2 decades of hindsight. Charles?
Indeed, Bobby, the names on that wall, as the man just mentioned, number well over 50,000 in a period of time stretching from 1959 to 1975. It is a slice of American history. Nearby, part of the Vietnam Memorial, is a statue of 3 soldiers. 3 soldiers frozen in time, frozen in that period of Vietnam, frozen somewhere in combat, looking for a way out, it would seem. Nothing else, though, is frozen in time. Everything has moved on. Bruce Morton, who covered the Vietnam War, returned there recently, returned to see what Vietnam was as he remembered it and as it is now.
You can still hear the sounds of old Vietnam in this Hanoi street, for instance, where they make and sell musical instruments. But you hear the sounds of the new Vietnam a lot more often. The fax machine in the hotel lobby. The sound of video games.
Hurry with the board, travel.
The sound of television. Satellite dishes dot the skyline. You can even channel, sir.
Projects ever undertaken by the House. We have plenty back.
The national bird these days might be the crane. Construction is everywhere. New offices, new housing, lots of joint ventures, foreign firms in partnership with Vietnamese ones. Fancy new housing for the new entrepreneurs. English language billboards. The old Hanoi Hilton, where American prisoners of war were held, will become a real hotel. Some of the cells will be kept as part of the new design. The American flag once again flies every morning in Vietnam. The U.S. has an interest section in Hanoi, not yet an embassy. Once, a misty morning along Hanoi's lake shore would have found men and women practicing Tai Chi. Now it all looks newer and more Western. Hula calisthenics. Well, most of it looks Western. You figure this one out. And everyone has something to sell. This woman in the traditional conical hat is watching what sounds like MTV. Old and new keep rubbing elbows. You buy chickens the old-fashioned way, but the outdoor barber wears a Walkman. Down south in Ho Chi Minh City, these young people are urging clean air and respect for traffic laws. The river is lined with billboards, the skyline keeps changing, and in both cities, preservation groups are working to keep some old neighborhoods intact. This is South Vietnamese President Thieu's old palace, and that's one of the tanks that ended the war here almost 20 years ago. Now you can rent the palace, and Sony has this day, with pretty women in traditional outsize and even dragon dancers. It's a new high-tech exhibit, expected attendance 25,000 a day. Panasonic, the Sony man confides, has its show across town. Some things do not change. In Hanoi, Vo Nguyen Giap, the general who won all his wars, talks with visitors. There he is with Ho Chi Minh in 1945. And he walks in his garden, where the flowers have begun to bloom. Some things have changed. In Hanoi Park, a statue of Lenin stands lonely in the rain. They don't talk much about Marxism anymore. This is still Ho's country, one party with a bureaucracy that often frustrates outsiders, but it is also a place which is changing very fast. They don't say it. The Vietnamese are running towards a free market economy as fast as they can. Bruce Morton, CNN, Hanoi.
When U.S. veterans came home from Vietnam, they were little honored, but since 1982, they have had this wall. The veterans fought for it. You'll find some here every night. This is not a place that shuts down business when the sun goes down. In fact, some, a group that calls itself the Last Fire Base, maintains a round-the-clock vigil. Ted Sampley is executive director of that group. Mr. Sampley, why? Why do you stay here hour after hour, night after night?
We've been flying the POW/MIA flag and the American flag there on this particular group since 1986. And as long as we can keep the POW/MIA flag flying, it's a morale booster for the families of the men still missing. Plus, it's a symbol that we're still here and we still want answers. And
the answers that you're looking for are to the question about where are the, what, some 2,000 still missing?
Well, we know we'll never find the answers to everyone, but there's a specific group of Americans who went missing in Vietnam that the communists had them in their hands at one time or another. We've got pictures of them alive in captivity during the war, and they were never returned, alive or dead, and we're demanding answers to that. The communists know exactly what happened to these men.
These are answers that you think only the Vietnamese can provide?
The U.S. government could provide some answers on that. Unfortunately, we knew when President Bush opened the floodgates to lifting the embargo, and then President Clinton, not too long after that, lifted the embargo against Vietnam, that our days were numbered on getting these answers, because we knew that big business, the interest of big business would take over, and that's exactly what has happened. The answers are there. Vietnam and the United States both are going to be embarrassed to release them.
Embarrassed why?
Because it's taken so long to bring closure, as I've heard the term being placed out here in the media lately, for families that have, the answers have been there for 30-some years. Plus, notwithstanding the fact that the evidence is overwhelming, that not only did we leave men behind alive in captivity, but some survived into the late 80s and possibly 90s.
Do you feel that, some people would say there's a point when you have to let go?
This is not the point. The answers are there. We know it. And it'll come.
You fought in the war. Have you been back?
I attempted to go back this past January, but the Vietnamese did not want me back.
Because of this activity?
I have been very high profile in criticizing both the Vietnamese government and the United States government because of their failed POW/MIA policies.
Do you sense that you can get more answers from the U.S. government?
Absolutely, if they'd open their files, truly open their files to the American people and to any researcher that wanted to look.
All right, Ted Sampley of the Last Fire Base, a group of veterans who maintain a vigil around the clock here at the Vietnam Wall. And while there are veterans here, there are also veterans from the Vietnam War who've gone back to that country. And Tom Mintier links up with some of them when we come back.
Ho Chi Minh City, a city that 20 years after the end of the war has now something resembling order. 20 years ago along this boulevard, it was crammed with people trying to leave this country. Along this boulevard that leads to Thanh Yat Palace, the presidential palace of the South Vietnamese. the place where the tank crashed through the gates, officially ending South Vietnam and reunifying this country, something that they're going to celebrate here over the next couple of days. We are reporting live from the rooftop of the American Embassy. This is a location that really hasn't changed much over the last 20 years. Behind me you can see where the U.S. Marine Guard positions were as the last helicopters left from this rooftop. There were millions of soldiers that served here, and this became the emergency exit. This is where the final Americans departed from here. A lot of soldiers have no problems relating to Vietnam, but there are thousands that are still having difficulties. And Vietnam for them is something that may never leave them.
We find the kids, especially the Amerasians, just sleeping along the side here.
Don Mills and Pat Moore travel light, but both are looking to dump what they call some excess baggage here in Vietnam. Emotional baggage, that is.
There's one that says, when I die, I'll go to heaven because I spent my time in hell. Hey, come on.
All right.
Don Mills is not only a Vietnam vet, but somewhat of a tour guide. He often brings others back for what he calls a healing process.
I've taken guys back that lost an arm, a leg, and half a face. I've had guys with no legs, both legs blown off, come back and then come back again.
POW stand.
POW stand, yes. America, what's this here?
Vietnam stand.
Pat Moore left Vietnam in 1969, unconscious on a stretcher. Wounded twice before, the third sent him back to the United States.
They had...
Someone lost that in the bush?
There for a while.
They lost it in the bar.
Since the war, life has been difficult. 3 failed marriages and enough mental problems to have doctors busy for nearly 20 years.
I've had sleep problems, like, you know, I can't sleep without the television on. I don't even sleep with my wife. I sleep on the couch. I have to have noise because when it's quiet, the hair on my back stands up. You know, it reminds me of being on an ambush. Since I've been back to Vietnam, I've slept like a baby.
Look at the lighters. How many lighters you want me to buy?
Like so many veterans coming back to Vietnam, it has apparently helped.
Hey, where is the circle bar from here, man? Right here.
Moore now says he feels so good, he stopped taking his Prozac medication.
Hey, here's what I like. Look at this. Hard Rock Cafe. That's Saigon.
Walking the streets of what was once Saigon still brings back memories.
Mr. Wee!
But ones that can now be dealt with.
When somebody mentions Vietnam to me now, I don't even think of the war. I think of, I wonder how they're handling the traffic lights.
What is it about coming back here that lifts this off of you?
I think seeing the people as people and not the enemy. You know, I was a young 18-year-old, 19 years old, a Marine, brainwashed. I joined the Marine Corps to straighten out my life, and that sure was a big mistake.
Both men now say the war was a terrible mistake, but both have sons in the military. Don's son is a junior at West Point. Ironically, he's dating another cadet. She's of Vietnamese origin. One of Pat's boys served during the Gulf War in Iraq. While both say they want to put the Vietnam experience behind them, it is sometimes difficult.